The 21st of September, 1939. Just weeks after the German invasion of Poland, Nazi forces occupy Warsaw and begin systematically targeting the Polish intelligentsia. Politicians, academics, artists, clergy, and resistance members are arrested under the guise of political repression. Many of them are loaded onto trucks and driven out of the city under the pretense of being transferred to another prison. Instead, their destination is a remote forest near the small village of Palmiry, about 30 kilometers northwest of Warsaw, where large pits have been dug in advance. Here, men and women are lined up at the edge, shot in the back of the head, and buried in mass graves. Between 1939 and 1941, more than 1,700 people will be executed in this way. This series of killings becomes known as the Palmiry Massacre, one of the most notorious crimes committed by the Nazis in German-occupied Poland. However, this crime will not remain unpunished, and the main perpetrators will pay for their crimes with their own lives. Before Palmiry became the site of mass executions, the terror started in Warsaw itself. Warsaw had long been viewed by Nazi leaders as one of the greatest obstacles to their plan of subjugating the Polish nation. For them, the city was not just another place on the map, but the very heart of Poland's political, intellectual, and cultural life. The capital had more than 900 schools and universities of various types and levels, about 200 museums, archives, libraries, theaters, and cinemas, as well as over 900 places of worship of different faiths. More than 50% of the nationwide press circulation was published in Warsaw, and the number of university lecturers and students accounted for about 40% of the entire country. After the German invasion of Poland, which began on the 1st of September 1939, Warsaw was stripped of its status and reduced to a provincial city within the newly created general government. Yet, it remained the beating heart of Polish culture and the headquarters of the Polish underground state, quickly becoming a stronghold of armed and political resistance. Years later, on the 14th of December 1943, Hans Frank, the head of the German-occupied part of Poland, named the general government, wrote in his diary, "There is one place in this country which is a source of all our misfortunes. It is Warsaw. Without Warsaw, we would not have 4/5 of the trouble we are facing now. Warsaw is the focus of all disturbances, the place from which discontent is spread through the whole country." The Polish capital had surrendered to the Germans on the 28th of September 1939. Only 3 days later, SS Brigadeführer Lothar Beutel and his Einsatzgruppe 4, a Nazi mobile death squad, entered the city. Public and private buildings were searched, and mass arrests began almost immediately. On the 8th of October 1939, 354 Polish teachers and Catholic priests were detained, accused of harboring Polish chauvinism and posing a threat to public order. Before long, Warsaw's prisons such as Pawiak, Mokotów, and the Central Detention Center in Danijowiczowska Street, and the Gestapo headquarters at 25 Schucha Avenue were overflowing. Many prisoners were deported to concentration camps, while others were executed. In the first months of the occupation, political prisoners were secretly shot in the gardens behind the Polish Parliament building. Between October 1939 and April 1940, several hundred people were murdered there. But carrying out executions in the very heart of Warsaw soon became impossible to hide. The Nazis needed a place where mass killings could be carried out in secrecy, and for this purpose, they selected a secluded clearing in the forest near the village of Palmiry. From then on, the executions were carried out with chilling precision. members of the Order Police, and soldiers from the 1st SS Totenkopfverbände cavalry regiment stationed in Warsaw served as the primary executioners. They were overseen by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police officers under SS Standartenführer Josef Meisinger, the security service and security police commander in Warsaw. Mass graves were dug in advance, often by members of the Reich Labor Service or Hitler Youth. These ditches could be over 30 meters long and nearly 3 meters deep. Those smaller, irregularly shaped graves were also prepared for smaller groups. The forest clearing was gradually enlarged, and on execution days, local forestry workers were given the day off. German police patrolled the area heavily to prevent any witnesses from approaching. Most victims were brought from Pawiak prison, loaded onto trucks under the pretense of being transferred to another prison or sent to a concentration camp. Prisoners were allowed to take personal belongings, sometimes given extra food, and even handed back their documents. In the early months, this deception was effective, and many victims did not realize their fate until the last moments. Later, as word of Palmiry spread through Warsaw, some prisoners tried to throw letters or personal items from the trucks to alert their families. During post-war exhumations, some bodies were found with notes reading, "Executed in Palmiry," written just before their deaths. At the site, victims' bags were confiscated, though they were sometimes allowed to keep documents or small possessions. Jews still wore the Yellow Star of David, and Red Cross badges from Pawiak's infirmary staff were found on others. Some prisoners had their hands tied and eyes blindfolded. Victims were lined up at the edge of the grave and shot, often with machine guns. In some cases, they were forced to hold a pole or ladder behind their backs so that their bodies would fall into the grave in an even layer. Post-war investigations revealed that some wounded were buried alive. The Nazis attempted to conceal these crimes. Graves were filled in, covered with moss and needles, and planted over with young pines. Families were told their relatives had died of natural causes, yet secrecy proved impossible. Locals, especially forestry workers, saw the convoys of prisoners and heard the gunfire. At great personal risk, forester Adam Herbanski and his colleagues marked the locations of the graves and passed this information on to the Polish underground. A few photographs taken by the executioners themselves were also stolen by resistance members, helping preserve the truth for history. German policy was directed against representatives of Polish political and intellectual life. The common people were considered useful only as unskilled labor, while the intelligentsia was believed to be the only part of society with national consciousness. By exterminating the elites, the Germans hoped to destroy Poland's national identity and reduce the rest of the population to a passive mass. The Nazis defined this intelligentsia broadly. It did not mean only those with formal education, but anyone who commanded respect, influence, or leadership in society. They refer to this targeted group as the Polish leadership class. The largest and most infamous execution in Palmiry took place on the 20th and 21st of June, 1940. Over the course of 2 days, 3 transports brought 358 prisoners from Pawiak. Among them were some of the most prominent representatives of Polish political, cultural, and social life. The victims included Maciej Rataj, former Speaker of the Sejm, which was the lower house of the Polish Parliament, socialist activist Mieczysław Niedziałkowski, parliamentarians such as Halina Jaroszewiczowa, District Governor Ludomir Skurewicz, and respected intellectuals like Jan Belczykowski. Lawyers, journalists, artists, and industrialists were shot. The celebrated Olympic champion Janusz Kusociński was also murdered. In total, 82 women were executed in this single massacre. The scale of the loss was staggering, and the intention was clear: the destruction of Poland's leadership class. On the 23rd of July 1940, Governor-General Hans Frank officially declared the AB Aktion, which aimed to eliminate the intellectuals and the upper classes of Poland, over. The Palmiry massacre was a part of this action, but in reality, the killings at Palmiry did not stop. Executions continued throughout 1940 and into 1941, often in smaller groups, but always with the same purpose: terror, intimidation, and the systematic elimination of those who could inspire resistance. The last confirmed execution in Palmiry took place on the 17th of July, 1941. Some details remain uncertain, as several transports vanished without a trace, but evidence suggests that the summer of 1941 marked the end of Palmiry as an execution site. The main reason was secrecy. By then, the crimes committed there were no longer hidden. The name Palmiry began to appear in the underground press. Reports from the Polish underground described the killings in detail. Resistance intelligence even managed to obtain several photographs taken by German executioners themselves. These shocking images were eventually smuggled to London. After the war, Palmiry was among the first Nazi crime scenes investigated by Polish authorities. The efforts of Herbanski and his fellow foresters, who had marked the location of the mass graves at great personal risk, allowed exhumations to take place. Hundreds of bodies were recovered from the sandy forest soil. Many were still blindfolded, with their hands tied, clear evidence of execution. Today, the Palmiry Cemetery and Museum serve as a place of remembrance for the nearly 1,700 people murdered there between 1939 and 1941. Though many of those responsible for the Palmiry massacre never faced trial, in some cases, justice or even revenge eventually caught up with the perpetrators. The first of them was SS Gruppenführer Paul Mörder. He was the SS and police leader in the Warsaw district in 1940 and 1941, and was formerly in charge of the subunits carrying out executions. He was killed in action on the Eastern Front in February 1942. Ludwig Fischer, the governor of the Warsaw district who oversaw the terror campaign, was sentenced to death by the Supreme National Tribunal in Warsaw, and in March 1947, executed. A central figure was Josef Meisinger, the commander of the German security police and SD in Warsaw from late 1939 to early 1941. Known as the Butcher of Warsaw, he played a direct role in the AB Aktion and was personally responsible for the transports that ended in the mass graves at Palmiry. Like Fischer, he was sentenced to death by the Supreme National Tribunal in 1947 and hanged. Justice also caught up with Hans Frank, the head of the general government. After the war, Frank was tried before the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg, found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and executed by hanging on the 16th of October, 1946. During the 5 years of Nazi occupation, approximately 6 million Polish citizens were murdered.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.